So I wanted to give a little bit more context to tonight's interview. It's a little bit different than what we've done before. Alex is not a carnivore, he's not following the carnivore diet, but he is actually an avid hunter and outdoorsman, and I actually met him in a Clubhouse room that was about making the hunting community more inclusive. And I was actually invited because, well, I'm a carnivore and interested in meat eating and also in animals. And it was, it was really refreshing to be in a space and talking with someone who has, a great deal of respect for nature, for animals, the outdoors, but also understands the place of animals in our in our diets. And so our conversation sort of began around hunting and access to the outdoors, and then I just really wanted to hear more from him and understand more about what he did, what his business was, and his ideas about the relationship of Black Americans to the land and to the South. And so I invited him on to have this conversation about, what he does and, the importance of land to the Black community. And it was, really an enlightening conversation, really fascinating, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. So we're not talking specifically about the carnivore diet, but we are talking about the place of, the importance of land to, to our community. And that includes the ability to hunt, which of course, until not that long ago, I mean, this is how everybody got their food, so including Black people. So there really shouldn't be this large disparity. And I know, even in my family, my grandparents, they hunted, like that was dinner. They fished, and even now, my family members who still live in North Carolina, they're avid fishermen. So we should be in these spaces, and now I'm learning from him, I understand why, we aren't, and why it might be important for us to invest in owning and purchasing rural land. So anyway, I know we've had a long hiatus from the podcast, and I do apologize about that. I had the death in my family, and then having COVID, and then, just sort of getting caught up with things. But I am back. I've got a bunch of interviews that are ready to go, and I'm looking forward to providing awesome content for you. So enjoy today's video or podcast, and I look forward to touching base with you soon. Okay, so we are recording now. So please tell me about yourself. Tell me your name and your company, and yeah, let's have fun and have this conversation.
Awesome. My name is Alex Harvey. My company is Legacy Land Management LLC, and I am a consulting forester, wildlife biologist so I started a company to help address the issues of Black land loss throughout the Southeast, and I've been doing it for about 4 years or so, give or take, but I've been a professional forester for about 15, and very complicated, oftentimes problematic and troublesome issue of land loss in the South within African American families, and it's an issue that is near and dear to me. So I wanted to do something about it, and that's why I started Legacy Land Management LLC.
So can you tell me, why does it matter? I mean, why does it matter if we are losing land?
It matters for a lot of reasons. For one, the opportunity to create real wealth. No real wealth is created without land. You can use land to create long-term wealth. I think also, it's really important to have green spaces where everybody can go and feel safe and ultimately belong, if you will, right? So I would say, the reality is that black bodies don't exist in the future without green spaces, and that's why I started Legacy Land Management.
And for those of us who are like city dwellers, can you tell me what does a forestry mean? I mean, what is it you're doing?
Yes, so that's pretty complicated, actually. So what I do is help landowners of all kinds, state, federal agencies, nonprofit organizations, educational institutions, private families, whomever, manage their land to a particular objective. Now, we use forestry or forest management as sort of the means to help accomplish their financial objectives or their aesthetic objectives or their recreational objectives. But it is a really it's an important tool to create long-term wealth when you have acreage, and let's say larger than 30 acres, right? And there are a lot of properties across the southeastern United States that are, of course, much larger than that are within African American ownership that are not being managed at all. And so, managed intentionally, those properties can they can yield rather very good financial return over a long period of time using forest management.
So, are you saying that you can have land and build wealth off of it doing something other than farming? I mean, I don't know what
Yes,
else you do with the land besides have a backyard and a pool and like a barbecue.
right,
So,
right. So, to take it back a bit, when previous generations of our ancestors wanted to own land, they wanted to own land for the specific reason that it gave them autonomy, right? And it gave them the opportunity to take care of their own families, to take care of themselves, to take care of their communities. In some cases by farming, but in some cases, they were growing timber or they were doing other very unique things. And if we look at, for instance, the history of the civil rights movement as we know it, particularly in some parts of Mississippi that were very crucial, um, those people that sort of sustained the movement were African American farmers who would welcome in the SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or other civil rights organizations at the time. They would oftentimes, if those folks were arrested, they would put their farms up, for sale and get these people out of jail, and all these other sorts of things, rather. And so, land ownership and land is it's everything. It's the future of how wealth will be generated and passed down. And frankly, that's already been happening by and large in other communities, but not necessarily so much within African American communities. And it has a very complicated, oftentimes challenging, and even very difficult history where land is a very traumatic thing, land ownership, because of course, if you go back to how a lot of these lands were acquired in African American families, we acquired them just after slavery or sometime thereafter, where our families worked and toiled and were treated under very unfair circumstances, right? And so that created a lot of generational trauma, if you will, and that trauma still persists to this day. But I think the thing is to connect people with their land in a meaningful way, and to help them understand a vision for how they can utilize it not only for themselves but for future generations. And I think in that context, everyone would see that as something important and valuable. Right?
Well, do you find that there's like, I don't know, an opinion about, living on the land, life in the country? Because, like, I grew up in New York, and my grandparents came up from South Carolina and Georgia, and they, liked city life, and they grew up in rural areas, but they did not want, that at all for their kids or for me, for that matter.
Right.
So
Right.
now, the idea, I kind of think, given what you're describing, perhaps it is a really good idea for someone who is in the north, in the city, who maybe has some money, maybe not enough to buy a second house, in New Jersey, but maybe it is enough to buy 40 acres, in Georgia, and hire
Mm-hmm.
someone like you to figure out how to, have it earn money. So,
Yeah.
are you finding that there are people like that who are coming to you now, or?
Uh,
Or is there
yes,
still
I
kind of a
do.
stigma about it?
I think the answer is yes and no. I think that there are a lot of people again who have inherited lands and who are trying to figure out what do I do with this, how do I make it all make sense, and so those are more often than not the folks that call me. And there are other people who just simply don't have any sort of connection at all, and that's okay too. I would say a piece of land is just like a bank account when managed right. You don't have to necessarily visit your bank account every day, but you do some monitoring, right? And it's the same thing with land. It is a really important finite resource, right? That you can use to in a number of different ways, not necessarily as money as you picture it in the real hard terms, but again, it's oftentimes about having a place to go where you can get yourself together and just kind of belong in peace, right? And so um, yes, I would say the answer to that is both.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I kind of appreciate that idea, what you're talking about, of having a connection to place. In the city, I mean, you can rent an apartment, you can even own one, but, it's a city. Like, you don't have like connection to the ground and to the place that you're standing in the same sort of way. So
Mhm,
I do appreciate what you're describing there. So,
mhm.
what would be the ways? So, if someone were to, hire someone like you, so you're like on retainer, like you continue to work with them over the years, figuring out how to, maximize the land.
Yes, sure. I mean, ideally, you want clients that you work with long term because what we're in essence talking about is asset management, right? So, we want to establish long term relationships where, those folks become, sort of part of the family, if you will. When they think about, I need this advice, I need that advice, just like you would have an attorney or a doctor or anything else. So, um, I think that that's just really important. If I could just back up a bit, just for clarity's sake. So, just prior to starting Legacy Land Management, I actually worked for a civil rights organization in the South, and so I started my career with the U.S. Forest Service, and I was living in the Northeast up in Pennsylvania, and I really wanted to sort of find my way back south, and I did. And there was an opportunity to work with African American families in Alabama and Mississippi and so forth. And so I went to work for a civil rights organization where um, I sort of got the broader understanding for how these things play out in families, and how families are ultimately, robbed of wealth, if you will, and how they, ultimately sort of don't have the knowledge of resources that are available to help them. And so after doing that work for about 3.5 years, I decided, that an important aspect of this. So one of the things that we did is we worked with these landowners to get funding through the U.S. Department of Agriculture, in order to uh, implement what's called conservation practices. So, if it's tree planting, if it's, any of the tools that we use in order to manage a forest, the U.S. Department of Agriculture in rural areas will actually, fund a large portion of that. And so, what my job was to sort of identify the historical barriers to involvement in these USDA programs for African American families, and there are, plenty. There's a history that's well documented of discrimination and all those things. And that doesn't necessarily exist to this day, because within the USDA, a lot has changed. But, you know, there's still a sort of stigma, and people remember, again, that generational trauma, if you will, of not being treated fairly. And so, my thing was to help connect families with those programs and how to use those things to their benefit. And
I'm sorry. So
the thing that
just to clarify, the generational trauma was I guess systemic racism that went on in the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So
what,
black people being systematically denied access to loans that were meant to support landowners and make sure that farmers were able to keep their lands. That's what you're
right.
talking about, right?
So partly yes. So programs that I'm talking about are not actually loans. They're basically free money that the federal government assesses to farmers
Oh,
and
even better.
landowners.
Free money that were
Yeah,
denied.
right. So,
Okay.
but also, some of the things that happen in those rural communities, the sort of, for lack of a better word, I mean, it's kind of economic violence, right? In a way, because there are so few opportunities in many ways, and that really just sort of closes out any and all opportunities in a really, real way for African Americans across the rural South. And so, there
I
are.
actually have not heard that term before, but I think that's really insightful and excellent. So economic violence, when we're cut off from resources and support that is meant to help in
Yeah.
in situations where there's not a lot of options.
Yes, of course. And so, the factors that sort of affect or have affected historically African American families are, they're numerous. But yes, I would say USDA is probably in large part, or historically has been, a barrier and a challenge to those families, that land, remaining in those families, and generational wealth being created, right? So, we can sort of draw a straight line from African American families throughout the South and their decision to leave the South and literally leave land and wealth behind and go out west or go to the northern, urban areas. And a lot of that is the result of lack of access to programs that were really important and could be very helpful. So again, these are very real issues that happen every day, and they present themselves in very unique and oftentimes very troublesome ways, I would say.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this is really helpful. And I know that, certainly in my family and, and amongst friends of mine, this concept of learning to build generational wealth in the Black community is really important. And people are talking about it a lot. I really hadn't thought about rural land as being a way to do that, since I'm not a farmer. It's kind of like I don't know what else I would do. But I should tell listeners now how we first met was I have a friend who started Modern Carnivore, and which is a group that is meant to promote hunting in modern people. And I was in a Clubhouse room that was hosted by that person that was really talking specifically about racism, and I guess in the world of hunting. And that's where I met Alex, who is also, an avid outdoorsman and hunter. So we were talking about that. And I have a good friend who is also an avid outdoorsman, a Black man from Wisconsin, but who, loves the outdoors. And I like to hike. Hunting has not been something that I did, but as a person who is a big meat eater and a self-described carnivore, I feel that I should not be so divorced from what goes on in the outside. So I'm certainly interested and willing to learn. And so anyway, this is the context in which we met. And so as I, since I have a platform and talk to Black carnivores specifically, but also, any carnivore who's interested in eating well, I know, we're interested, we buy a lot of meat, and we're interested in supporting, Black ranchers and Black farmers. So, that was a conversation that we had started to have. And so we had talked a bit about finding Black ranchers. And can you tell me more about that? Are there any? I know there's one that I've interviewed on this channel, the Southwest Black Farmers, but who else? Or Southwest Black Ranchers, sorry. But tell me about who else.
So there, I'm sure there are more than I possibly know of or can count, all across, various areas. I know, I've met folks from Oklahoma and Nebraska who were Black, and they were ranchers and farmers. I've met folks from Arizona, and Texas, and certainly Mississippi and Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, all over the place. So I think that there are long established networks of farming organizations within the African American community that you could, reach out to and sort of, begin to explore, who some of their member base are in terms of cooperatives and those kinds of things. So again, I would mention the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. I think their corporate office is in Atlanta, but they have offices in all over Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, Epps, Alabama, and several other locations. Albany, Georgia is one. And, so you could reach out to them, and you could again reach out to I think the Limited Resource Landowner Assistance Network. There's the Heirs Property Center for Heirs Property Preservation, in Charleston, South Carolina, and Roanoke Electric Cooperative in North Carolina. I mean, there's organizations all over the place. So I would just say, they have connections with landowners in these rural communities that could in fact sort of be that connection for you in terms of your interest. But again, yes, my interest in that conversation we were having on Clubhouse is, yes, I'm an avid outdoorsman, and for me, I grew up on a cattle ranch, and by and large, I mean, there were large periods of time when I was growing up that my family didn't really go to the grocery store because we were self-sustainable, and I would say part of that was because of hunting and fishing and that sort of thing. We raised cattle. We did everything. So, I would say, and perhaps if anything, this pandemic has kind of been proof that, kind of a reversion to that way of life could be very valuable to everyone, right? In terms of, the ability to sustain and protect one's family and feed one and everything else. So I would just say that the rural lifestyle. I think a lot of people, yeah, it's really hard at times. It's certainly not easy. It's a lot of hard work, and like anything else, I mean, you're taking a risk. Certainly, when you're a farmer, you're taking a risk. But I would say, there are benefits. I am rural. I'm an advocate for rural America. I came from rural communities. I have been to New York before, and Pittsburgh, and all these other major cities. But it wasn't necessarily my thing. It was cool to visit, but when it was time to go, I was ready to get out of there. So,
Yeah.
I would say that there is a lot of value in reconnecting to our rural roots throughout the South, and finding a way to establish and solidify our presence in these communities once again, and to connect with the sense of identity and of freedom and community that our foreparents had. There is a lot of disconnection in that regard. So I think that part of the work that I do is literally trying to connect people with the intangible things that are so important to life, right? And things that many folks just don't really know much about. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I appreciate, what you're talking about. Certainly, for me in the city, I mean, I've been born and raised in New York City and do love city life, but, even I have gotten tired of being, trapped in the city.
Yeah.
So I can definitely appreciate, having, access to more outdoor stuff. But I think one of the other things that people, in my community, and perhaps other people are starting to be concerned about is, a real disruption in the food supply. There's a real big push to support lab grown meat. I don't know
Mhm.
why. It seems like it would be 1 billion times more expensive than just growing a cow. But, it seems like that is something over the next probably decade. I would imagine there's going to be a lot of that. There's going to be, perhaps disruptions to the meat supply. And so having a connection and being able to buy directly from the farmer is, a better option. And so I know, a lot of us are starting to think about that. Certainly the quarantine, identified that. And so I'm hoping that a lot of these ranchers can, are starting to get to the point where either they can butcher and ship directly to the consumer, or
Mhm.
they're working with a butcher that that we as consumers can buy through. Like, what do you think is going to happen? What's the future of that part of the food supply, like outside of supermarkets?
Yeah, I really can't say. I feel like that's a discipline that's kind of a little bit beyond what I do every day. But from personal experience and living in these rural communities, I think that there are ways around some of the challenges that we see if we're sort of away from um, rural communities, right? So I just remember, it was a very common thing when I was growing up to take a steer, to the processor, and for them to prepare that steer in whatever way we told them we wanted it, and then package it, and then we would go and pick it up, and bring it home and put it in the freezer and have meat for a year. And I think that if you are connected with who some of these small mom and pop processors are throughout the U.S., you would probably find very easily that many of them ship, and so then the benefit is just to connect with a small farmer, near or what have you, and and see that the farmer just gets your steer to the processor, and you work it out that way. So I would say that it's probably not as hard as a lot of people think, um, but again, it sort of takes that sort of on the ground experience, if you will, where um, you know um, people in rural communities could tell you very easily, well, oh, you just go and do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I would
Well,
say,
yeah, exactly. That's the that's the question. But
yeah,
if we could, I mean, I interested and willing to, put such a resource on my website so that people can go to it. Like, I'm interested in curating this kind of information, and we have buyers. So, I kind of feel like I want to say, I asked you what's the future of, the food supply outside of the supermarket. And I think that, it's sort of up in the air, right? There are possibilities at this point. Shipping has gotten, to a certain point that you probably can do some
can't
shipping,
afford
at
it.
least in certain
Yeah,
parts of the country.
right.
So, and we have money and a desire. So those are the three ingredients: product, desire, and money.
Yeah,
So, like,
yeah. So I mean,
we can design
my
it how we
point,
like.
right? My point being is, I although I have firsthand experience, I kind of don't really
Hmm.
work within the realm of the food system, so I don't really
Yeah.
know some of the specifics there. But I think that again, with those small farmer organizations that are out there and making the connection with those within those communities, I think that something really great could develop. You know,
Hmm.
probably pretty easy. So yeah, and then one of the things that I would always throw in there is wild game harvesting, your own food, and either learning to process and prepare it yourself, or working with, again, some of these processors in small communities to prepare it, to process it the way you like. I would say there are just so many issues that pop up when we start talking about hunting and being connected to the outdoors, if it's hunting, if it's fishing, where what we see happening is that the future of these things that many just kind of deem as sort of a recreational thing that's kind of outdated, whereas particularly in communities, and we do have rural communities in the South that are food deserts, but within those communities where people can go and harvest game and catch fish and do all these things, these things are profoundly important in terms of a lot of people being able to feed themselves. And so, I am always an advocate for connecting minority communities to hunting and fishing, because it's really important. And these things are sort of, they cross, they intersect, if you will, with a lot of social justice issues that all of us are concerned about. And I think that you know the future of how that could possibly look and its value to minority communities is still untapped in many ways, particularly to minority communities in urban areas.
Well, I did want to pivot to hunting, so thank you for that. Do you think that hunting or outdoor activities at all has declined in the Black community, or
Yes, yes,
yeah,
unfortunately
why
so.
are people not doing it?
Well, I think again, a lot of land has been lost. Historically, African Americans have hunted and fished in some regards, but have hunted on private property throughout the Southeast. We have not necessarily utilized public lands because historically those were not green spaces that were welcoming, right? And so when these lands are lost, you have to look at what that really does to a family, to a community. These people lose their sense of identity, you know, and and so now that is, so just after the Civil War, African Americans owned somewhere around 15 million acres. Today, it's somewhere around 2 million, maybe less, and
Wow,
it's very
that's big.
staggering. We're losing somewhere around 30,000 acres a year,
Wow.
currently. And so, hunting, the numbers are
And that
dwindling
that
because
includes land all over, not just rural land. So some portion of that 2 million is
I believe this is mostly farmland, but I would say it probably
okay.
is land
Okay.
off. Yeah.
Okay.
So yes, and I would say that because of our history and patterns of hunting primarily on private lands, then a lot of people have sort of just gotten away from it. And it's not that there's not an interest or a sense of connectedness. Again, I have friends all over the Northeast in urban centers, and I mean they enjoy it, and they often call me getting pointers and wanting to come to the South to do it with me. So there is a sense of belonging amongst many, and I would always say, to make an additional point, is nature doesn't belong to one particular group of people, right? It's nature, and it belongs to everybody, if you will. And it doesn't mean that a certain group of people sort of belong there and have more right to participate in certain activities. And so I think that's always sort of at the crux of the dialogue of Black people sort of understanding and connecting with nature and the outdoors and that kind of thing. And so, certainly, given the profound history and contributions of African Americans all throughout the South, in terms of what we have lent to the development of American culture, if you will, in these rural areas, we have a profound historical sense of connectedness there that we shouldn't ever lose, and in many cases remind ourselves of. Right, we need to do that. So
So, just to clarify for those of us who are, not familiar with hunting life. So, are you saying that some people hunt on public land and that's allowed, but other people hunt on private land, and who owns that private land? Like, how does that
yeah,
work?
yeah. So this all gets pretty complicated. Yes, public lands, national forests, national wildlife refuges, Bureau of Land Management. All these federal agencies manage public land for various objectives, but one of those things is habitat for animal species, and the reason for that, of course, is for people to go and utilize it in terms of hunting and fishing and everything else. So again, for African Americans across the Southeast in particular, we still sort of have knowledge of how these, a lot of these lands unfortunately sort of came about in ways that many in the African American community would feel were unfair. Like they were taken through eminent domain or some other, method. And so, um, a lot of people still feel that those are not necessarily welcoming spaces. And I would say that that's certainly not the case today. I mean, a lot of these agencies have become very diverse from top to bottom in terms of their leadership and people who work there. And so I would say most people would visit a national park or a national forest or wildlife refuge or something like that would probably see somebody that looks just like them in uniform there. And so, but there is a historical challenge that many of us are working to help resolve, and it's very
I'm
complicated.
sorry,
Yeah.
just to clarify for me, like I've gone camping and I've gone to like wildlife refuge, but I don't remember seeing anyone hunting.
Yeah.
So are these things happening in the same places? Should I have been wearing orange? I don't know.
Well, it depends on what time of year you were there. I mean, I don't
Okay.
know, if their hunting season was open or anything like that. Probably not. I don't know where you visited, but if you're in the Northeast and you probably went in the spring or summer or something like that when the weather was much nicer, and there probably wouldn't have been people hunting at that time. So, um, you know, um, but yes, hunting does very much happen on a lot of these public lands, state parks, all of these things, national forests, everything. So.
Okay. And so in the past, it wasn't really something that Black people could or felt comfortable doing because these were spaces that were unwelcoming, either, the staff or the way they were operated or whatever. That seems to have changed now, but there's still just, we've kind of lost that connection with a generation or so that's now like
Right.
not been raised with hunting. Okay. And then on private land, people hunt either
Yes.
on their own land or somebody they know and they get permission to do it.
Right. Right. And
Okay.
and and that of course is, out of a sense of safety, if you will. If you wanted to hunt, you would hunt private land where you're probably not going to run into somebody who's angry with you being there. So, yes.
Right, right. And on the Clubhouse call, there was the discussion of something that happened in Milwaukee that was that 10 years ago. I mean, I don't remember the details. Can you share that?
Yeah,
Or
it was probably more than 10 years ago. I can't exactly remember the year that it happened, but so the Hmong community of Wisconsin are very avid outdoorsmen, hunters, fishers, everything, and they would, they hunted. They love to hunt, all over the North Woods up there. And this one particular instance where a gentleman, to my understanding, and there may be a little bit different, but to my understanding, he felt disrespected in regards to race or something. There was something said very mean, and unfortunately, guns were drawn, and he ended up shooting a number of people, to which he said out of self-defense. And these are, these are sometimes very real issues that do happen. We all know that, right? And whether you're in the city or rural area or what have you, you're bound to run into somebody who has a terrible attitude and feels that you don't belong there, right? Unfortunately, so I guess that was the particular instance where this occurred, and it it turned out very badly, and it never should have happened. But that is, unfortunately, the reality that we live in today's
and this
time.
guy was alone in the woods
Hmm.
with a
Hunting.
gun, and there
Yeah.
were like 10 other white guys alone with him in the woods with guns. and
from
then
my
he's the one that
understanding,
ends up going to jail. Like, so,
right? Yeah,
yeah. But
yeah,
I always think about like the way these, I don't know. I mean, the way hunting is sort of portrayed generally. I think of drunk white men in the woods with rifles, and then occasionally, there's some hunting happening. But I mean, this is like a stereotype, of course, of what you see on,
right,
on TV
right,
or Deliverance. I saw that.
right.
So
Okay.
I assume like there are other experiences happening, but I would
Yes, of course.
imagine like the worst possibility is that you have people who are impaired by alcohol, have firearms, and are like really racist and have decided you don't belong there. So for me, like that's enough to make me kind of go, do I really want to go out into the woods by myself
Yeah.
or, with one other person and a
And I,
gun?
and I think again, your feeling there and your, thoughts or perception or what have you is, it's there's a history behind it, right? And it's in many regards, warranted. And I'm sure you will find some instances of that. But I would say, most state and federal agencies today, if you are hunting and at least on public land, and in some cases on private land, if they encounter you and you have a gun and you're drinking, then you could very well be taken to jail or cited or that sort of thing. But
Oh,
yeah,
good. So
I
that's
do.
frowned upon now. That's frowned
Yes, of
upon.
course. Yes, yes,
Okay.
it is. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
Mhm.
when I was growing up, people, drank and like drove their boats around the lake, and it was like, that was just what you did. But it's like,
Right.
yeah, this is actually dangerous.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Having a gun and drinking is not a good idea. But, it is a bad idea. So, but yes,
Yes.
I would say, for as much as I will critique anyone in regards to race and racism, I would say that there are instances where I have been received very warmly by people who look totally different from me and whom I perhaps thought would not be welcoming. And so those experiences also are out there. And there's a lot of work being done, I would say by people in the hunting community now, to be more welcoming to minorities of all stripes, right? To come out and feel welcomed, and take part in hunting and fishing and recreation of any other kind. So yes, ma'am. I think that there is change happening. You know.
So if I were interested in, like, having an outdoors experience, going hunting, like, what would I do?
Um. First things first, I'd say, you could find a mentor. Like you could reach out to the organization Hunters of Color, or you could reach out to Outdoor Afro, or there's all sorts of organizations out there. But find somebody
Wow,
who
I've
is.
never heard of that. Outdoor Afro and
Yeah,
Hunters of
yeah, they've
Color.
been around for
Okay.
numbers of very noted. Yeah, they're a very noted organization. Um, I'm unfortunately not a member of either, but I do know of them, and I love what they do. I think it's really important. And so, the first thing is find a mentor, find someone with some experience. Spend time with them. Ask everything you could think of. There are no stupid questions, and be prepared to really spend some time learning like anything else, right? Spend time out in the woods and, learn more about the animals that are pursuing, and their habits and their needs and, all these sorts of things. One of the things that is oftentimes really misunderstood or not noted enough, rather, is that hunters play a bigger part in conservation than perhaps many other groups or just about any other group in terms of the dollars that are spent that go back into conservation and other programs. The North American wildlife model, if you will, where a lot of those funds rather are allocated for conservation and the preservation of all sorts of game and animal species. So
So
that
wait,
is
are you saying that the money spent on like hunting licenses and stuff like that is going right back into conserving the land?
it is. It very much
Okay.
is. And ensuring that species like deer and ducks and turkey and all these other sort of game species are around for a long time to come. So yes, ma'am.
Okay. So that's really interesting, actually. So I'm definitely gonna check out these organizations. Not sure when I'll quite be ready to do something that bold, but it's definitely intriguing to me. So how long have you been like hunting? Like, did you go out as even a tiny little kid, and has this been
Mhm.
in your blood from generations
Yes,
past?
yes, it has. I think I'm probably at least a fifth generation outdoorsman. You know, my family has always been from rural communities, and I know that I actually have firearms in my possession that belong to my great grandfather and great great and so forth. And so, these are people who lived off of the land. So that terminology of, whatever the land produces, they use to sustain themselves. So, I have been outdoors for as long as I can remember. And it's sort of second nature, if you will, for me. And you know, I can't envision life for me without it. It is just a part of it all. Where my dad would take me to his hunting club, and we would always go fishing, and we had horses and cows and goats and chickens and all these things when I was growing up, and it's just it's a lifestyle, I guess you could call it that. But for me, it's just who I am. You know, yeah.
Hmm. I mean, that sounds, idyllic in some senses.
I'll tell anybody. It really was a heck of a way to grow up. For any kid, but certainly. Um, I could look back in so many ways at my childhood in rural communities across, Mississippi and other places. And there was just so much of an abundance of a sense of community and a sense of identity and being raised by a village, and that is important to all of us, young, old, what have you. And the sense of adventure as well, where when I was growing up, we could go into the woods and just you know lay down beside a creek for the day and just kind of have a good time. I mean, people understate how important that is in terms of personal well-being, unfortunately. And it was very idyllic, um,
Yeah.
a heck of a way to grow up. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw a study that came out, I think like 2 years ago, that was saying they had looked at, or they had the participants of the study spend time in nature about 30 minutes 3 times a week, and that was as effective or more than Prozac in terms of treating their depression. Yeah,
Hmm.
so having access to nature is a really big deal. It's not a
It
little
is.
thing. Yeah.
No, it's not. No, it's a very, very big deal. Yes. And I again, um, yeah, I laugh now because like the first time I was in New York, and growing up, I would see New York on television, and I'd be like, just in awe, and right. And so when I very first visited, I just, I didn't really know what to make of it. It's so funny. Like, my wife's family is from Baltimore, Maryland, right? And my first visit there, or Pittsburgh, New York City, all these places, Los Angeles, and it seems uh, like a world away from anything that I, even to this day, still know. you know, um, just
Yeah.
just because you know we're all the same, but we're all really kind of different in the way that we navigate the world, and sometimes what our experiences are. And I think that I would hope that many African Americans, find their way back south and reconnect with why this was so important to our foreparents. There's a reason why our great grandparents and grandparents and the like really loved Mississippi, and really loved Alabama, and really loved Georgia, right? And really loved Texas, and those rural communities, beyond some of the perceptions and things that we know of in terms of how bad they were, and people being treated in many instances, when people could escape that, and they did so into nature and into a sense of solitude with and connectedness with the land around them. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really beautiful. So, if people were interested today in purchasing some of the rural land, like the land that's been lost is now public land, or it is privately owned by non-black families. So,
Mhm.
what's happening? I mean, what land is available now, or would you just kind of have to look around and wait and hope some land comes up to be sold publicly? I mean, is this stuff being traded or
So
passed down
yeah,
on families?
there are a number of ways to locate land for sale. My company, we do land sales in Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, and I have a partnership with a much larger company that was a part of an opportunity to grow more black businesses like mine. And I have to reference, Southern Forestry Consultants and Wiregrass Ecological Associates as sort of, apprentice or apprentice. I have an apprenticeship relationship with them, if you will. And they also could be really helpful because they've been in real estate and all those things for a number of years. So I would say yes, definitely uh, you know reach out to me, reach out to other consultants throughout areas that you might be interested in order to locate lands that are very much available. And it's not as
And
hard,
you
I think.
shouldn't think about this land as just like a country home, or just like a plot of land. You can
No,
actually
yeah,
work with you to monetize it so that it at the very least can carry itself.
exactly, exactly. That's the point of it all. You know, yeah.
Excellent. So what's can you? I'm gonna put your contact information in the description box, at least on YouTube. But can you tell everybody how they can contact you?
Yes, I am on LinkedIn. A Alexius A Harvey, Alexis, middle initial A. Harvey's my last name. You can find me there. You can find Legacy Land Management's business page on Facebook, and there's also an Instagram, um, Legacy Land MGMT, and my email address is a Harvey at definemylegacy.com. You can reach me there. So all of those places, you would get me directly.
So we had a very deep and important, and I think very powerful conversation that I hope galvanizes a lot of our listeners into action. But let's have some fun questions now too. What is your
Mhm.
favorite thing to eat? What do you love to hunt? Are you a fisherman, hunter? What? Tell me.
I do it all. So hunting, fishing. I mean, I'm heading to Oklahoma in about a week and a half to go on a turkey hunt, and I'd love to hunt deer, quail, ducks. I love duck hunting. It's probably my favorite of everything. I do
Really? Do
love to
you
fish.
do you have a
Yeah,
Labrador? Do you do it with a dog, or is that something
I
you do on
don't
your
do it
own?
with a dog, but I have to get a dog pretty soon, so I'm gonna get one.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hunt with a bunch of buddies who have dogs. So, but yeah,
Oh, so
so
dogs are part of the duck hunting process.
oh my goodness, yes, so bird hunting of any stripe, yeah, the dogs are a really important part of that.
Okay.
In terms of helping to find and locate the game for quail and that sort of thing, and helping to retrieve it for ducks and others. So yeah, it is a I would say duck hunting is a hunting in general is a beautiful culture, and it's not one that is sort of not known to African Americans. We'll recognize it even if we haven't necessarily done it. We'll recognize aspects of it as being home, if you will. So yeah.
Yeah. And what's your favorite dish? Or what's your favorite meat to eat?
you know, I'm from Mississippi, so you know, I like to eat a lot of different stuff. I would say beef, man, steak. I mean, I'm a steak type of dude. So I grew up on a cattle ranch, and I can never ever get my fill of a good steak. So, cowboy cut ribeye is my favorite. But I'll eat just about any kind. But yeah, that's my go-to if I can help it.
And that's the king of steaks, or that's the king of beef. Cowboy cut ribeye, right?
The best. It is the best.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. T-bones are okay. I'll get. Like they're all
Okay.
right. New
Yeah.
York strips. Yeah, they're okay. But cowboy cut
Yeah.
is the way to go. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I
Yeah.
just made a picanha, that cut,
Okay.
which is, I guess,
Mhm.
popular in Argentina, and I think it's the
Yeah.
top
Yeah.
sirloin. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yes.
So
Yes. I'm
that was
familiar. Yeah.
amazing. And I
Oh, I
roasted it
bet.
in the oven. Yeah.
Oh,
So
nice. Nice.
good
Yeah.
stuff.
Very good. Very cool. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we had an amazing conversation, and I am really looking forward to continuing it. So, everyone who is listening, I hope you really enjoyed today. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to Alex or to me, and I'm happy to get you connected. I'm gonna list all of this stuff in the description box in the YouTube, and I will figure out where I'm gonna put it. I don't know if I can. I think I can do it on the show notes on the podcast on my Libsyn. So I will give I'll provide the link for that as well. All right, everyone. Thanks so much, and I look forward to talking with you again soon.